Yo, what's cracking? What's popping? What's shaking, everybody? Welcome to episode 20 of the Comic Cinematic Universe. It is I, Young Chill, and to my right on the screen is Young Grace. What's up, Grace?
What is up? How are
I'm
we doing
doing all
today?
right. So as far as what we got lined up today, we're taking it back just simply for the fact that we want to save the Peacemaker, the last three episodes of Peacemaker, not for next week, but the week after. So we're going to chat about it then. But today we are going to recap The Falcon and the Winter Soldier because we always wanted to kind of recap that. So we're going to recap episodes 1 through 3. And we're going to touch a topic that I posted up on Instagram earlier this week with the future of Vision and Wanda in the MCU. So I'm excited to actually no, I know Grace is excited to get into that.
My hands are sweaty. Yes, I am very excited. WandaVision is freaking amazing. I'm super invested in their story, just, from the comics and obviously the MCU. So I'm excited when we get to that for
All
sure.
right. So let me just go ahead and change the graphic here. Wait, no, hold on. We're not talking about Wanda yet. We are talking about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. All right, here we are. Awesome. So, when it comes down to episodes 1 through 3, let's start off at episode 1, just because I mentioned this before. As far as like say similar to Hawkeye in episode 6, I feel like episode 1 for me of Falcon and the Winter Soldier is when Falcon got a lot of shine, and this is at the very beginning of the episode. You know, we got to see Falcon in full form pretty much take out a unit of commandos that's kidnapping some U.S. soldier, and this whole sequence to me, it set the series off right. And I know this is technically the second series, right? Because this was after WandaVision on Disney Plus, right?
Yes,
So
yeah, that's
after
correct.
WandaVision, like I was wondering where or how this was gonna start, and episode 1 just kind of started with a bang. Do you agree?
Oh, for sure. Like in comparison to WandaVision, that was very like a slow build. I think the series that have followed have definitely picked up the momentum much sooner, and they've been lengthier too in
Yeah.
comparison.
So we do get the I forgot the name of, I don't want to call him French either, but this gentleman we saw in Captain America and the Winter Soldier at the very beginning. Captain America faced off against him on this ship, and we get to see him again. They brought him back in this series, which I kind of like, just because I feel like I know him to be a UFC fighter in real life, so they kind of used him here more so as like a just someone who's badass at fighting, you know, and just that whole sequence of, I don't even know. It's not skydiving, right? It's I don't know what it's called when they have the wings. Do you know what it's called?
No, are you talking about Sam directly or like the
The bad
other, like
guys,
the bad guys? Is
right?
that what you're referring to? The bad guys? No, it's not
Is it?
paragliding.
I don't
It's
know.
not.
They're gliding.
Is it? Oh, dang. Jesse, if you're watching, I should have known this answer.
Oh
I feel
man.
like she knows. We'll
Oh
ask
snap.
her. We ask
Right when
one
you
of
said that,
our
Jesse
friends.
said, "What's
She's
up? What's up, Jesse?"
oh no, I was gonna. Oh yes, hello Jesse. But I have we have a friend named Jesse who actually is a
Uh,
paraglider, and she's like the one in the know for everything jumping out of airplanes. So I'm gonna ask her like, what is this called? We'll send her the sequence, and then we'll bring it back in next week's episode when we break down, the rest of Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
yeah. So, with this, we get to see um another character as well, because after the whole sequence and Sam saving the captain or whatnot, we meet a character that I found out, either you told me or I read about it online. He actually ends up being Falcon's wingman. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Falcon.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you
Yes.
know his name, like his comic book name?
Oh yes, I have a whole like segment. Are you referring to
Mm-hmm.
Joaquin Torres? Yes, like the individual that we're
Yeah.
introduced to here. Yes. So Joaquin, we see him throughout. Well, I think we just referred to him as Torres in the show, but we see him all throughout like their events. He's not like a main, like he's obviously not Falcon or the Winter Soldier, but he does play a role throughout the show. And so in the comics, he is an immigrant who comes to America from Mexico at the age of 6. And as he grows up, he has obviously like a very huge respect for like the Mexican American life, and has a lot of empathy for refugees from Mexico trying to find like sanctuary in America. He gets captured by this organization who kidnaps people along like the US Mexican border to be experimented on. And so Falcon, or at this point, actually, it's Sam, already in the Captain America mantle, is notified of this by, I think, his grandma, Torres's grandma. But by the time he finds Torres, he's already been essentially mutated into some kind of falcon human hybrid. And they actually use, I think it's like Red Wing's DNA or something along those lines to make that happen. So then from there forward, we see him like take on the mantle essentially as Falcon. And he kind of fights alongside Captain America, now Sam. And so it's really cool to see him here. And just, based on this history in the comics, I suspect he's going to be a bigger role, as we see season 2 roll out and things
Right.
like that.
And I just brought up the image of uh it looks like in the comic it said breaking news, Captain America's new partner is an illegal immigrant or something like that. So here's one thing about this show just in general that I kind of like, and I kind of like that we're talking about it today. Just simply for the fact that February being Black History Month, I'm kind of glad that we're actually deciding to tackle this, just because I kind of made a note in episode 2 or 3 where they're kind of tackling some racial issues, but it looks to
Yes.
me, just from this image in itself, like it looks to be like, say, just the Falcon and the Winter Soldier or Captain America. This new Captain America kind of tackles the issue of race as well. So I have all the respect for whoever wrote, designed this comic book, then leading to this show, because yes, it's cool that these are connected to the Avengers, but aside from the other world issues of like World War II and everybody else fighting the Germans, like it's cool that they're kind of bringing the issues of America into the comic books, and that's just something that I noticed as I was watching episodes 1 through 3 here.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's always been something that they've done like super well at. I feel like with these comics having been created, in like the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, a lot of the things we've seen are very much that you see a lot of like the issues we've had in the past. And I feel like it's so cool to see things that are so, prevalent even now, being represented in the MCU. This isn't just a problem that's held within like the walls of, the fantasy of the MCU. This is a real thing that we deal
Right.
with even now, And I'm happy you brought that up, because with there being a lot of commentary of like immigration issues within the comic that Torres is in, I'm wondering, since this show has had a lot of commentary on like the African
Hmm.
American experience. I wonder if like season 2 is going to have something along the lines of like the experience of the Mexican community, or even just like immigration as a whole. And maybe that's how we see Torres more involved in the story,
Well, we're gonna get into it next week, but as far as Torres is in general, this series ended with him taking the wings of the Falcon. So it's already apparent
Dude,
that he is going to become this character in the comic book, brought into the MCU.
I completely forgot about that. And as I was doing my little deep dive on him, I was like, how are they going to do it with the fact that Red Wing, right? Because they use
Hmm.
Red Wing in the comics essentially to create, like, turn him into some type of like little hybrid. I'm like, in the MCU, he's, animatronic. He's basically
Right.
a drone. So I was like, how are they going to do it? Ah, oh, dude, something I completely forgot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just because I think it
Mm-hmm.
may have been like I'm gonna skip ahead to episode two real fast. We're still talking about one, but let's say in episode two intro, John Walker, um, there was a scene to where they're interacting on the back of an army truck after a certain major sequence went down, and Sam was like, "How did you
Mm-hmm.
find us?" And John Walker was just like, "Oh, because Red Wing is part of the government, and government issue, and we're
Mm-hmm.
issued. I mean, and we're able to track that now." Being that rewind back to Torres, now that he has this suit, this brings the question of will he be um, part of the government, being that he's technically working with government gear, and now Sam's kind of working with Wakandan gear. Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, I feel like it's very similar to Sam as the Falcon, right? Like he was issued, I think, that by the government, but then he became like a private operative. Like we see that happening here. They make a lot of commentary, I think, in the second episode where he's like,
Free
we're,
agents. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like a
yeah, yeah.
private team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, we're free agents. We have a little bit more, we don't have to, get warrants and go by the book and all these things. And so I'm assuming, or I would imagine that Torres would have a similar role where it's like, although he's taking on the Falcon, what I'm assuming the Falcon mantle, and it's a government issued thing, he's obviously working with the army. I think if anything, he's going to branch out into some type of like private sector, like alongside, our new Cap and Winter Soldier. So I think that's kind of how we're going to see it, hopefully, in season two. I'm excited. I did really like the performance of this actor. He's a very likable character right out,
Mm-hmm.
like right from the beginning. So I'm excited to see like more from him in future seasons for
Well,
sure.
I feel like the way that episode one introduced him, I feel like he will get a bigger role just because he right now is, let's say, part of the U.S. Army, right? Oh, and to answer our question in the
Mm-hmm.
chat, yes, we're talking about both the comics and the series. This is necessarily more so about the series, and we're talking about comic book references. But back to episode one, Torres is the one that introduces us to the Flag Smashers, and unfortunately, he's the one that kind of takes the beating for the team, uh, you know,
Yes.
and with that, um, who knows? This may spark something to where he may see something flawed in the U.S. government. Who knows? He may just kind of venture off now with these wings. I know I'm going back and forth, but and who knows? He may fight alongside the new Captain America. But in episode
Yeah.
one, I think yeah, he brought that kind of innocent personality to the game because he is not a part of the Avengers. He's not seasoned as these other people that we know, like Bucky and Sam. So I can see them putting more behind him and kind of building him up. Like this was kind of his intro as well. And then maybe if it is season two or maybe in an MCU movie, uh, I feel like his future is bright in the MCU.
Oh, absolutely. And just kind of referring to that little briefing that he has with Sam, I love how that scene kind of starts out with this like elderly man thanking Sam for, his contributions to bringing everyone back, one of those people being his wife, and immediately getting into that briefing about the Flag Smashers and kind of what they're all about, right? They're trying to revert the world back to, pre-snap, pre everyone like
Mm-hmm.
coming back the blip. And so immediately we're seeing that, not all good things came from bringing
Mm-hmm.
everybody back, right? Like the reinstitution of the borders all throughout, people, not just getting like their social security back, their citizenship, but also, their jobs and their homes, which have displaced a huge portion of the world. And that's really kind of the arena
Correct.
we're working
Yep.
with this entire series. And it's a very juicy topic and idea because I think, going into the series, I didn't realize just how um negative like it could be, right? We've talked about it several times. Like I think, post Endgame, we're like, well, how can, bringing everybody back be anything but good? But we're realizing very quickly that's not the case.
I'm just gonna say the only thing negative that came out of the blip was the Eternals, but that's another topic. We can just move on from there. So,
The Eternals were the Eternals were active. I mean,
right,
even before,
right,
but I do, yes, we won't get in there. That's a whole nother
definitely.
conversation.
So, we've kind of talked a bit about Sam, but let's get into uh Chad. Listen, Jesse's still salty. He said, "Grace, I still remember you placed the place where you put the Incredible Hulk on that list. We're not gonna get into our list right now. It's fine."
I stick with what I said. Love you, Jesse, but I'm sorry. I stand
But
that.
yeah, let's talk about Bucky for a bit. Do you mind getting into that for a sec?
Sure, let's do it.
Go for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were ready to take the lead. I'm sorry. So after we see the Smithsonian like press conference where Sam essentially, gives up the shield, we kind of segue into
Mm-hmm.
Bucky, right? He's having this nightmare flashback, whatever you want to call it. We're experiencing it as a flashback. It's his nightmare, and we see the Winter Soldier in action, obviously
Mm-hmm.
being controlled by Hydra. He's completing a mission and there's a witness. And so, being that, the Winter Soldier is efficient, he takes him out. And that's where Bucky wakes up. So, we see him obviously still dealing with the traumas of having been the Winter Soldier, which one can only imagine, like having been in that for, they say how many years, but honestly, I can't remember. I feel like
Oh,
it's
yeah,
80
yeah,
years, I think is what they
yeah. Mm-hmm.
mentioned. So obviously that's a huge theme that we're going to see throughout the film, but this is kind of the scene that starts it all off.
And with that being said, because we do see Bucky in like full form here, and this is back to him being the Winter Soldier, and it's like the way we introduce him. It's more so on some, yes, he's having this nightmare, but he's going through I don't know if it's technically the 12-step program, but like he's kind of going through these programs of like making amends with the people that he's either wronged as he was like the Winter Soldier, and kind of he wants to make up for it. Yes, we learned that he did get a full pardon from the government, but like say he after Wakanda
Get
is
it
still
together.
fighting these demons. Now, I brought up the cover here that you sent of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I'm curious to know, do they kind of tackle these demons in the comic book? Do you know?
That's something I didn't really check, and it's something I can check before we get into, once we come back next week for sure. It's I don't know. I would imagine that they do, right? I mean, like, I think the Winter Soldier has a similar history in the comics
Mm-hmm.
as we've seen in the MCU. So I would imagine it's a theme that is tackled, if not in that specific comic series, maybe somewhere else. So for sure, I think it's something that's been written out and that
Yeah.
this is based on.
So, with that, he quote unquote makes a friend with an Asian gentleman that happens to be the father of one of his victims. Now, I get that he feels bad, and there's like he wants to tell this gentleman as far as what actually happened to him, but this is where the show kind of takes a different turn from like the action, and this is where we kind of get into the feels of like Bucky Barnes, if that makes sense. Like this is where hashtag heartstrings kind of comes into play, where you actually kind of feel bad for someone who's technically been a slave to Hydra for, like you said, however many years, whether if it's like 80 years or 100 years or whatnot. And all we know now is he does want to be better, but he is, I don't know. It's hard. I think that's all I can really say as far as the process of him kind of. Would you say is grieving or coping? What would you say?
I mean, all of it. Like, I think the thing that kept coming to mind as we're seeing, Bucky like early on in this episode is, like he remembers everything. Like, I'm thinking to Civil War when Iron Man like pulls him and he's like, "Do you even like remember them?" And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, I could hear like Sebastian Stan like, "I remember all of them," or something like that. Like, it's traumatizing because it's like you're aware of what's happening from what we understand as an experience, being the slave to Hydra, but you can't do anything. It's a direct order. You cannot like disobey, So it's a trauma that only I think honestly like this the closest thing I can think of is, veterans who, have to, when they're out in war, they have to take orders. They have to do things that they wouldn't necessarily maybe choose. And they have to come back and deal with, how hard those experiences are, And he is obviously like as part and he's going to therapy, which I think he definitely needs. And the cool thing is that he's going to therapy with someone who gets it, and I think that's where that parallel also comes in. His therapist, I can't think of her name right now, but that doctor isn't just a therapist. Like, she was in the army. Like, she has experience, she understands somewhat of the traumas that Bucky has. Obviously this is the MCU, so we're looking at them from a worldly
Mm-hmm.
place. But no, I'd call it all of that: grieving, guilt. It weighs heavy, and he's dealing with this all alone. Like, when we see him in Civil War, he obviously has Cap, who's there to remind him like, this was not you, this is
Mm-hmm.
not your choice, like you're worth saving. And the doctor words it, I think, like the best. She's like, "You are truly and utterly alone, and that is the worst prison anyone can ever be in." So Bucky has been loved by like the fans for so long. We all like stand and protect Bucky. I think all of us were so offended. I think when he had so little screen time with Cap, in the last, Infinity War and in Endgame, but there's so much there, so much.
Random. Did you see the movie? This is a little off topic, but did you ever see the movie Get Out?
Why does that sound
It's
familiar?
like say,
I
okay,
don't think I've seen
well,
it.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
condense it real fast. It's a story of a black guy going to reach or meet a white family with his girlfriend, his white.
Oh yes, I know the movie. I haven't seen it, but I know
Okay,
the movie you're
so
referring to.
he
Yeah.
somehow gets hypnotized, and he uh like the whole premise of it is like say your conscious goes into what they call the sunken place and someone else kind of takes over from there. Now, the only reason why I bring this up is just because in talking about Bucky Barnes here, I feel like he once the code words quote unquote activate the Winter Soldier, his conscious goes
Mhm.
to this sunken place to where he can see everything consciously, but he can't control his body, if that makes sense. So,
Mhm.
say with everything, thankfully, Wakanda fixed that, but it's like this kind of brings it to light as far as and like you mentioned in Civil War, like he said he remembers everything, so he knew what was going on. He wasn't blind to everything. It was just that he couldn't control it. It wasn't him, like Captain said. So let me ask, with that being said, he knows that he couldn't control it. It wasn't necessarily him. He was sent to war in the original Captain America to fight these people. So can he feel bad for what the Winter Soldier did, being that it wasn't him?
I mean, he does, because I think he says it the best in Civil War. He's like, "I still did it." Like, he still has to deal with the fact that it was his hands committing all these things. Like, I think just as a person, it's hard for that not to be the case. Even if these were not your choices, these were not like your commands, like you were still the one to do it. So he has to live with, I mean, just like what we saw, here in this first episode, like those flashbacks of having done those things, like it still haunts him. So, despite all of that, like we don't see him as, obviously like the villain that Hydra really made him to be as like
Mm-hmm.
the Winter Soldier, but he still has to deal with the traumas of those 80 years, all of those like, you know, assassinations and, the repercussions of it, like the pain that this one father feels. I have his name written down, Mr. Nakajima,
Mm-hmm.
Yori, right? And so it's, as part of this process, like I just want to kind of go back to like, I know we're kind of shifting gears from like this very like hashtag heartstrings, and I'm going to bring it back to like the little bits of
Mm-hmm.
comedy that they mentioned. So when he's having this conversation with the therapist and he's like, what are the three steps? What are the three processes? Like, okay, the first one's like nothing illegal. And as like they're explaining the processes, we see him like, hijacking someone's car, which I'm assuming is illegal. And then it's like nobody gets hurt. He knocked out like the passenger, and then he has to say like his schmeal, like I am no longer the Winter Soldier. I am James Buchanan Barnes, and you're part of my efforts to make amends. And so it's like he has this full list. I think he's marked down like the easy ones to kind of conquer, which is like, all right, get these people who I put in power locked up and off the streets. But I think like as we've seen with Yori, it's hard to face the people you directly impacted by, not your choices, but what you still were the one behind.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would say these easier quote unquote targets, they mentioned as to be put into power by Hydra. Let's say they weren't necessarily Hydra, but Hydra made the moves just so these people could be put into power. So let's say
Right.
he did like I wouldn't have used those rules against those people because those people were I don't want to say bad, but they were, they know
They were
exactly
bad.
how they came into power, but it's like you mentioned, like it's harder for him to kind of deal with the let's say the blood of the innocent, and that's
Yeah.
more so the harder ones that he has to tackle. And for what I remember in this whole series, I feel like it was just the older gentleman, Mister. Give me the name again.
First
Oh,
name Yori. I think that's easier to
yeah.
do. It's Mr. Nakajima, but Yori is what he like what Bucky calls him by his
Right.
first name.
So, I feel like he was the only one so far on that list. And we see in episode 3, Zemo points it out, like, who is this guy? Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
he's knocked out all of like the harder, no, I mean the easier targets because they were low key bad. But yeah, before we wrap episode 1, I think the last thing I want to touch is Sam, just for a second, because Sam,
Mhm.
he's at home. His sister's watching TV, and there's an announcement of the new Captain America, John Walker. Now,
Mhm.
he gave up the shield for his reasons. He mentioned it in Endgame. He said it feels like it doesn't belong to him. And even though Captain America did say it does, it just never felt right, So he gave it up, and of course the government just made something of it and gave it to somebody new. Now, is it or was it naive of Sam to think that they wouldn't do anything with that shield?
I mean, I would say, yeah, like he had some trust in him giving up that it was going to stay as, just as a symbol of what Cap stood for and just leave it at that. And so it was definitely, a betrayal, by the government to him. But it's like, it's the government. They do sleazy stuff. So I would call it kind of naive. And I think even Bucky like makes a comment to it
Mm-hmm.
in like the second episode when he has that confrontation with him about it. And like just kind of talking about like the Sam giving up the shield back when he's at the Smithsonian, like giving his speech. I think he sets up the stage for what that shield represents, and really kicking off that theme that we've talked about so much of like the passing of the mantle and how much weight is behind those symbols, the meaning behind it. And I know he has like a little heart to heart. I know I'm kind of
No,
like
it's
tearing
fine.
up
Like,
about this,
say,
but
like, right when
he's
you
a heart
said,
to heart.
like, the whole weight situation, he was just like, I don't want to carry that.
No. Yeah. Like, I mean, and something, I think there's like a quote I think about, like, it's like the person who, like, doesn't want to take that power is sometimes like the most fitting, and Sam definitely fits the bill. Like, he respects what it means so much that he initially gave up the shield. But at the Smithsonian, he has this kind of heart to heart with Rhodey, and I just want to talk about that for a little bit, because I think it's so fitting for us to see him with Rhodey, because I think it's such a parallel, because they're very much in the same place, just as much as you know um Sam is mourning, the loss of Cap, very much like as if he's dead because
Hmm.
he's not here anymore. Rhodey is dealing with the same thing of Iron Man, and the theme was very similar in Far From Home with Spider-Man. Like, who's going to be the next Iron Man? Like, I like the connection that they made there, because Rhodey doesn't. I don't think he has an appearance, there forward for the series, but I do like that they set that up right in the beginning for sure.
Say with that being said, I was actually surprised with this interaction just because if we want to go back to Civil War, even though it was Vision that had taken the shot that crippled Rhodey, he was aiming for Falcon. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say it was Falcon's fault for Rhodey being paralyzed. So I was kind of surprised to kind of see, even though yes, the events of in game is over and we've kind of come back to being friends, but that's an interaction that I wasn't expecting.
And I feel like that even highlights more so like how they're unified in the loss that they
Mm.
have. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, like, who else really can share in that, like, loss? I mean, of course, like Falcon and Bucky, like they're very much like they were both like the brothers of Cap, till the end of the line. Like, they understand what they're
Mm.
experiencing. That was good. That was good. You got to give me, yeah, thank you. And so I feel like it makes sense for them to have this heart to heart, very similarly to how like Hawkeye made connections with Ant-Man, because they have a very similar experience, you know, through the blip. I think I like this connection even post Civil War. I think it does show like the passing of time and just kind of where relationships have landed now that we're, post Endgame and all of that as well. So I like the scene, and it wasn't something I think I recognized how much I liked it until this like second pass through for
Okay.
the show.
All right. Do you want to get into episode two?
Yeah, so before we do that, real quick, so obviously episode one ended with, as you mentioned, like, the announcement of the new Cap. I remember seeing this for the first time, and like, I think I honestly stood up and was like, no, no. I mean, I feel like Bucky in episode two, as we're gonna get into, is us and like what we're experiencing. Because like when you see Bucky's face in episode two after hearing the news, like you just see betrayal, right, from Sam. Like he's like, "Why'd you give up the shield?" And just anger. Like, how can this man? Like, it makes me think of Harry Potter when he yells at Snape when how dare
Snape.
you stand where he stood? Like, yes, like how dare you? That's like my like feelings and memories of watching this for the first time. So I just wanted to kind of uh talk about that a little bit before we dive into episode two. But
um.
take it away,
Okay.
bring
Well,
us
let's
in.
say episode two. It opens with John Walker at his high school, and like they basically throw him like a pep rally at this high school, but like in this interview that he has with the interviewer, he mentions that he's never met Steve Rogers, but he kind of studied him after West Point and this, that, and the third. And with what he studied, he feels like they're brothers. And then cut to Bucky looking salty. Now,
Mm,
I would be salty
yeah.
too because Bucky and Falcon, of course, have fought alongside Steve Rogers. They're not brothers by blood, but brothers in war, no matter what. So they're brothers, and just to hear that from some foreign person who knows nothing of Steve Rogers, it's like a slap in the face, you know, and it's like when it
Absolutely.
comes down to just Bucky Barnes in general. Yes, we know him to be the Winter Soldier, but he is in the museum to stated to fight alongside Steve Rogers. So the world knows of Bucky Barnes. The world knows that he was the Winter Soldier and knows that he got pardoned. So why the interviewer didn't kind of touch the idea of Bucky or Falcon being Steve's brother, quote unquote, I don't know. I don't know how to feel. Like I would feel the same way, like that Bucky felt, you know. And I feel like if I were interviewing him and then he said that, I'd be like, okay, so with that being said, you feel like you know Captain. What about uh his relationships with, I don't want to say the Avengers, but you know, it just raises those type of questions, you know. And he was kind of speaking out of line. I feel like if anything, he could have just said, yes, I'm happy to be named Captain America, and I'm gonna do the best job that I can. You know.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
period, done. And I totally agree. And I think just to answer like that confusion of like why was that something that they didn't kind of bring up in the interview, because it would make sense for it to be the case. I think, I mean, this is a pep rally like for him specifically. Like if anything, it was, I feel like they wouldn't want to make it anywhere close to confrontational, but more so to show to the world like this is your new Cap. Like like unquestionably this is now the symbol that Cap stood for, which for us is a huge slap in the face. And that's why I feel like Bucky is us in like these experiences, because we're angry, you know what I mean, like we're upset, like that's how we respond. But I do love how before we even get to the interview we get to see him talk a little bit about what taking on the mantle means for him. Like he is
Mm-hmm.
nervous, right? Like he does understand to some degree what it means to be taking on the mantle. And I don't think he's taking it lightly. I just do think that he gets caught up in the momentum of it because it's a huge, like he says it, it's a huge shoe to fill, And there's a couple of things that he kind of mentions with his wife as well, with Lamar, and he just says like this is different, like I don't want Phil. And I don't know if it's Lamar or him who says like this suit comes with high expectations. It doesn't, it's not, it's Cap. This is Captain America. Like he's a symbol, he's an icon, he's put
But
on a
let's say
pedestal.
let's say with that
um
being said, like John Walker, he names his concern of talking to all these people in interviews, and he was talking to Lamar, and Lamar was like, "This is the job." Technically, no, it wasn't, because when it came down to Captain America, Steve Rogers, he wasn't doing interviews like that. He was just doing what he can to make the world a better place. So, not Steve Rogers, but John Walker, enter
John
John
Walker.
Walker doing this and saying, he's like, oh well, it's like I got to do this, that, and the third. I get it. You have big shoes to fill, but Captain America is not a media icon. He is more so an icon of action, you know, by what he's done to make everything better for everybody, you know. So I can understand how this can be I don't want to say frustrating, but John Walker, he's a soldier, you know. He's never been in the limelight. He's done all these tours and everything like that, and made a name for himself as a soldier. And he technically, I would say, is the same thing as Captain America before he was made into Captain America. He was just a soldier following orders to make sure the missions were completed, you know. So I can understand his
Mm-hmm.
concern of taking all of this, that, I don't want to say this, that, and third, but all of these interviews and talking to a whole bunch of people, because it's not something that Captain America does. It's just something that the government, which I kind of named, what's the name of this? It's called the the Global Repatriation Council. I hate that name. Is right. Like
Repatriatization. Yeah, yeah. I was writing. Yeah.
it's that the GRC that is kind of making him do that, and they're not Shield. Shield was more covert, but it's like they're kind of making it so he has to be put in the limelight, you know?
See, and I don't think it's specifically the GRC who like made him Captain America. I feel like it was just like, I mean, who knows what part of the government did that. I just know that his missions are obviously to help the objective of the GRC, and obviously, like they're being attacked, and also their missions being kind of contradicted by the Flag Smashers, which is why he like kind of gets brought into that. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's the GRC that put him up, but the point still stands. Like I like that this episode started off with giving us some of his perspective, because at least me, like coming into this episode, I was heated, you know, especially the way that we left off. I'm like, who is this man? Like, I mean, I was aware of US agent. I knew he was going to be brought in, but it's like, I still was not prepared for someone to be called like the new Captain America. And even with seeing him have some understanding of what it means to take on the shield, and he does have that like what's the word, ease into it. Even when he has like conversations with Bucky and Falcon, he's like, guys, like I understand it's hard to see someone else wear the shoes. I'm not trying to be Cap, I'm just trying to do the best job I can. He's still a little naive in his like approaches, and I think for us, I mean, that interview, it just comes off so cocky and like almost unworthy, just because of who Cap is and how much we are connected to him, you know. But it's like you said, like he comes from like an amazing resume. Like if someone was gonna give you the opportunity to be Captain America, like he said it himself, like I've seen him as a hero, I followed his career. It makes sense why he would have accepted it, you know. But
Well,
I
let
don't
me
know.
say,
It's
with that being said, like I'm not here to defend John Walker just because of the path that he goes throughout the series, but this is a mantle that an Avenger didn't want, you know? And
mhm.
with that being said, let's say if I'm John Walker, I'm a nobody. Yes, I have all my accolades and I've done what I've done in the military, but to take on the mantle of someone who led the Avengers through so many Avengers level events. This isn't like a tour in Iraq. This is fighting an army of androids. This is fighting an army of aliens. This is
Mhm.
fighting uh, the Red Skull. You know, like the history of Captain America is a mantle to the point to where if I'm John Walker, I get that I'm totally successful with what I'm doing in the military, right? Me myself, I would feel like Sam. I would be like, yeah, I appreciate the offer, but nah,
I ain't
but,
the guy.
but nah, I am not a super
And I
soldier.
think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
yeah.
flaw. Yeah. This man is flawed. Like, I hate him throughout the series, but I do like that we get this perspective before we see him crumble under
Mm-hmm.
the weight of the shield. Because I think it's in episode 3, we see a very distinct moment where we're seeing him start to feel the pressure. Like, here, he's like right in the excitement of it. Like, I have this shield on, all of this. Like, I'm feeling, all the feels. Like, I like that we start off with this perspective, because we're gonna progressively just hate him as the
Right.
series goes forward. But I do like that it starts off this way, because it's not like he comes in as a bad guy. He's just flawed, and those flaws are going to be enhanced. I mean, we're I know I'm getting ahead, but he's gonna obviously get enhanced with like the super soldier
Mm-hmm.
serum down the road. But it does, I think, in contrast, highlight how amazing Cap was, how
Mm-hmm.
rare he was. And I think also brings in like Falcon as like the most fitting like person to ascend to that like mantle at the end, But it's a good opening scene, and I do love how this then segues into, like you mentioned, like we see Bucky's reaction, and it shifts into him
Mm-hmm.
confronting Sam.
Yeah. So say with Now we're back to episode 2. I know we kind of went on a binge for a second, but like we see this confrontation. Bucky is obviously upset, and he is upset rightfully so, just because of Sam getting rid of the shield, but of this person who doesn't know Steve, you know, and uh, their interaction throughout this whole episode too is like, yeah, it's a little heated, but it's more so comedic because we get the whole in the hangar conversation about the big three, you know, and with that, uh, they make it onto the plane. Sam is more so doing his own thing, and he's like, "What's the mission?" Well, not Sam, but you know, Bucky's like on some "What's the mission?" and "What's the plan?" Don't call me Buck because Steve had a plan or something like that. This whole interaction they have. This is the comedic side of this episode, you know. But we kind of see where this brotherhood kind of bonds. It's like, yes, they've known of each other this whole entire like MCU, you know, through Captain. But this episode in particular, to where this is where we start to see. Was it this episode where we see the staring contest? You know.
Let me double check my notes. I want to say yes. Yes, it is. It's at the end of this episode is where we have like it's basically like couples therapy. So this is a reshift, like you said, like from them just being aware of each other and being connected through Cap to actually becoming a team. And they're both kind of in an agreement of like this is a
Mm-hmm.
temporary thing. We're just gonna get this done. Like Bucky's obviously invested in this because of the fact that there's potential super soldiers. That's kind of what piqued his interest and is like, I'm coming with you. And Falcon's like, no, you're not, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously he comes anyway. So we see that shift in this episode, and I don't want to get to it just yet because it's a we have a
Mm-hmm.
couple things before then, but once we get into that therapy scene, I'm just like, oh, that's a heart, hashtag heartstrings. That's a really good scene that I can't wait to dive in. So, but before that, we have the mission because we're introduced to not just like the flag smashers and like the members it
Mm-hmm.
contains, but the leader, right? We meet Carly. What's
It's
her last
something
name?
Morgan. Yeah, yeah. I wanted to say that. Yeah.
Morgenthau, yeah. So before we get into like the events of this, because we see them kind of like sneakily getting in, we can get some banter about like, oh nice, what does he say, like, oh nice espionage
Right.
skills or whatever, like they're comedic like banter that
Oh,
they
cause he
have.
called my
Carly
bad. He called
Morgenthau,
him the White Panther, and he's like, no, it's the White Wolf.
yes, he's like, huh. Yes. So Carly Morgenthau, she's actually based on a character named Carl Morgenthau, and he goes by the alias of Flag Smasher. And so that's obviously where they took inspiration for like
Mm-hmm.
her organization, right? And he's a freedom fighter whose goal was to liberate Earth from the oppressions of national rule. So we can see very much like how they took that inspiration to
Mm-hmm.
create not just Carly, but the whole organization that they have, right? And we soon learn that they're not just like very strong and athletic, that they are like super strong. And this is huge because it, begs a lot of questions as like, how is there a super soldier serum, like, after Steve, like who created this? Like the scientists that we've known in the past have struggled. We've got, Hulk as like a prime example of that. And it's a cool moment to kind of see, because us experience this for the first time, it like we don't know the answers. Like now here, like having seen this for like a couple times, we do, but it's kind of fun going back and kind of seeing these events
Um,
happen.
Random question. Uh,
Yes.
say with these flag smashers, knowing that they are super soldiers, this is totally random, not part of the story, but say when it comes down to their serum, do you think their serum is the same as what the Abomination initially took?
Um, I mean, I would say no, just because the serum, or I mean, I'm assuming it's something close in formulation, right? Because they all had the same objective. But the reason I'm saying no is because the serum that Abomination took obviously has had like all of these side effects that turn them into these mutated beings, you know? I think, he took several dosages to kind of get to the extreme that he got. Um, but there was a lot of side effects where this is not necessarily the
But
case.
like, let
So
me stop you right
I don't
there. Just
know.
just
Yeah.
because even after the first dose, Abomination became a super soldier. Like, yeah, he OD'd and
Mhm.
did multiple doses, and of course that's going to come with mutations. But say this initial dose made him a super soldier. So I'm curious, just based off of episode 2, right? Because episode 2 here in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, actually no, episode 3, they made it clear that the U.S. government, aka the CIA, had a sample of, um, let's say Isaiah. Do you know Isaiah's last name? Okay.
I don't. I'm trying to see if I
Well,
have it here.
Isaiah here,
Yeah.
he is uh a a walking talking version of the super soldier gone right, you know. So the government has had a sample of his blood since whenever they decide to make him, whether if it's 50s, 60s, or 70s or whatnot. They've had this on deck. So I was just curious, or not even curious, just wondering if, you know, just from uh General Ross being a part of the U.S. government, you know, if he had a quote unquote sample of Isaiah's uh, super soldier serum, you know? So it was a random question. I'm sorry I'm kind
Yeah.
of taking us off beat here, but
No, and it's I know I think it's honestly aligned because I think the super soldier serum is such a huge like part of this entire series. And I think it's a little messy when you look at the MCU. I think it's I wouldn't say clear when you look at the comics, but we'll kind of dive into it once we
mm-hmm.
get into episode 3. My question is like if this was the same serum, let's just say it was, why would they even have to have hired that doctor to try to create it if there was something already in their
Mm,
possession? Which is why I'm saying it's not the same, because then there would be no purpose for him to have to create it since it was already
well,
created. So I'm assuming it's
then
not
let me
the
counter
same.
that question with that is because we don't know. I know I'm fast forwarding here, but we have no idea who um the power broker is. I'm not going to put Sharon
Mm-hmm.
Carter in that seat because episode 3 kind of cleared it up for me as far as she may be associated with the power broker, but to me, she isn't the power broker. So if speculation on the internet is true, a lot of people think that General Ross is the power broker, you know? So if he, quote unquote, is the power broker, then it is technically the same serum, if that makes sense.
But then why would they, you know what I'm saying? Well, I guess the question then would be what's the
Yeah.
timeline here, right? But he didn't crack the serum until he came back 5 years later and the power broker continued to fund his research, right? Because that project was no longer in existence with the government, because he was working alongside the
Mm-hmm.
American government to do that. So, and we know the events of like Hulk and Abomination would have happened
Right.
way before, right? Like before,
Mm-hmm.
around the time of
Mm-hmm.
Iron Man, the first one. So timeline wise, if we're looking at that, and if we're calling the Incredible Hulk like canon with the MCU, which is
Yeah.
pretty established that it is, I would still say it's not, because why would they even hire him after having had already, let's say, created their super soldier serum if it was just going to be the same? You know what I'm saying? And maybe we're just kind of like circling on that topic, and maybe I don't know, like the answer is somewhere else. But I think in terms of the super soldier serum, like the continuity
Mm-hmm.
is a little messy. In the MCU, I feel like it's just not purely clear. So maybe there is no answer, or at least like a definitive answer. But just based on what we have, like I would say it's different, just because there would be no reason for them to even fund this project to try to get the serum if it was already a
Yeah.
successful serum. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it
If
does.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I know. The question
Yeah.
was a little out there. That's just again how my mind works. So, back to episode
It triggers
2.
conversation, so it was a good one.
So, he Oh,
So
do you want to go?
now I was gonna do what you were
Okay.
doing, but
All right.
you
So,
continue.
I mentioned the name Isaiah here, and this is where we meet the quote unquote first black super soldier. And I remember either you pointing it out when this episode came out initially, or me finding it online. Um, we kind of, or I saw, I guess, a comic strip of him versus Bucky Barnes, and they do kind of recap the events of the comics in this episode, which I kind of like that they kind of pulled from that, because he mentioned that he kind of broke Bucky's arm or something like that, his metal arm, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I did see that from that comic strip, so I thought that to be interesting.
I did see that. I don't remember if we had that conversation, but that aside, agreed. I love when you see these parallels, even when it's not like directly shown. I love when they just refer to them, because it like just all of this is birthed
Mm-hmm.
from the comics. So I love seeing the way it's intertwined and shaped for this world. And before we kind of talk more about Isaiah and just like what happens in Baltimore, we do have like the first interaction with Sam and Bucky and
Oh, right,
John and
right.
Lamar, which I think is a very fun kind of back and forth because I feel I have some sympathy with John and Lamar because they're both like excited to just be like we're
Mm-hmm.
superheroes, and like Sam and Bucky are like no you're not, like this is not earned, like they're very much like they're like we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
associate with you. When they're in the car together, there's this really funny moment where he's like, and who the hell are you? And he's like, I am Lamar, whatever his last name is. He's like, I'm gonna need more than that. And he's like, I'm Battlestar. And Bucky's like,
Mm-hmm.
stop the car. Like, I am no longer associated with anybody who calls
Right.
themselves Battlestar. So I have some sympathy for the two. We obviously are kind of in the same fields as Bucky and Sam, rightfully so. But it's still sad to see like how they're so like slapped by them. But it's there's some sympathy there in terms of like how I feel with them. But it's a fun interaction. We're gonna see more of that because this is not John's last attempt to kind of like team up with Sam and Bucky to go on the task of breaking or getting to the flag smashers. But it's a really fun like back and
Mm-hmm.
forth.
I would say, like, with John Walker, right? Um, he hasn't done anything wrong to this point. He is a team player. All he wants to do is, there's a mission. There's the flag smashers, and I need all hands on deck. I want to work with these other two gentlemen, but the other two gentlemen are just like on some, who are you though, And
Yeah.
I can understand to where John Walker, if anything, could take it as disrespect, but at the same time, it's just like, if I'm John Walker, I'm a newbie, and I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. But at the same time, being that Bucky Barnes is a super soldier, why not try to be aligned with another super soldier and a quote unquote Avenger to make sure this mission goes successfully?
Absolutely. And I think that is kind of like the place that he's coming from. And while they're interacting, that's kind of what he tries to communicate with them. I'm like, I'm just trying to do, my
Mm-hmm.
job as best I can, and how better to do it than to align with Cap's, right hand men. And I think that kind of triggers Sam. He's like, see, it's
Mm-hmm.
always the last line, because in their eyes, it's like, this is just even more so like you wanting to connect with us is just to even more so heighten that Cap's
Can we
been
talk about that
replaced,
line
and
though?
they're
Can
like
we talk
not
about that
about it.
line just for a second? Because he did say, he's like, I want to align myself with Captain America's wingman. Now, Sam took
Yeah.
offense to that line in itself, but Sam was Captain America's wingman. Like, it's not like Sam was out here. Yes, he was out here killing, doing what he can, but he was more so uh a part of Captain America's team, if that makes sense. It wasn't the Sam and Steve Rogers team. It was Steve Rogers, and I got Sam on my team. He's my quote unquote right hand man, you know? So for him to kind of take offense, I get the dramatic effect of the writing of this series, but I feel like he shouldn't have taken offense to that, if that makes sense.
I don't think he took offense to being called his right hand man. I think he took offense because he saw it as like John's trying to fit the role Cap was, and I feel like that line was like, how better than to do it alongside his like right hand man. Like if you were looking at it from like say
Oh,
a
you're saying
citizen's
that.
perspective,
Ah,
John would
gotcha.
be, yeah, it's almost like it's highlighting that he's
Mm,
replacing Cap, and I think that was the offensive part. Is like it's how more to show that Cap is being replaced than to literally cut and paste John into, the team that Cap instilled. So I don't think it's the right hand man, more so the replacement of Cap that he
gotcha.
was offended
Gotcha.
by,
Gotcha.
you know?
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And using John and,
Yeah.
Sam and
Okay.
Bucky for
I
that.
was just
Mhm.
I don't know. I was curious about that. Where do we go from here?
So from here, we get a scene with the Flag Smashers that I think is very important, because here we see that they are happily being assisted by, these citizens, people who have been displaced by the blip, people who are very much alongside, their mission, right? They see them as kind of like Robin Hoods, getting resources. Because just kind of going back to the train scene, initially, Sam and Bucky think like, oh, they're probably either stealing, dealing like some drugs, something like that, weapons. I think they say weapons particularly, and come to find out it's actually medicine
Mm-hmm.
and vaccines, right? So they are playing that role, and this is something that I love to see, because I think something that the MCU's been doing pretty well with, I feel like we saw this with Zemo, even Thanos in Infinity War, is that there's a lot of complexity to their villains, where you can almost see where they're the heroes
Mm-hmm.
in that perspective. And I like that complexity, because it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray, and there's so much story to be told there, and it's interesting to see that relationship with the Flag Smashers and these people who are dealing with the real life effects of the blip, where you see where they're fighting for. And I think Sam even says it in the car ride with John when they're talking about, they're enhanced, but maybe they're just trying to help people. And I think it's John who says like, yes, I understand. It's just the super soldier serum doesn't tend to
So
have a good history,
so with that, are the is the mission of the Flag Smashers pretty much the same as the GRC? Because no, but no, but listen,
No.
like say when it comes down to it, I know what you're saying is the Flag Smashers. They're more so looking out for the people that were blipped, right? Isn't the GRC looking out for those people too?
The GRC is trying to reinstate
Right,
the
that were
people
blipped.
who left. The Flag Smashers are trying to highlight the struggles, the people who were displaced.
No,
You know what I
no.
mean? To revert it back to the time in which the other half of the world was gone, because they think it was better when these people were not there. There were no borders, there was no none of that. They weren't being displaced from their homes, whereas the GRC displaced these people to accommodate the people who came
No,
back.
because
Does that
say
make sense?
now what you're saying, who are the Flag Smashers fighting for?
They're fighting for the people who were displaced after the blip, people who were essentially like taken from like their homes, to allow the people who came back to essentially be reinstated into the life that
But
they had left
but
behind five
with
years
you
ago, if that
saying
makes sense.
that, this is where my confusion lies. You're saying that they're fighting for the people that are displaced. So these people, no matter what, they were blipped. They were gone for 5 years.
Not okay, so the people who are being displaced, they are not the people who were disappeared in the blip. They're the people who never were gone. Those are the people who are being
Oh, gotcha.
displaced. And then this episode, in this episode, Carly has like this really good, I think, I mean, this sentence kind of like sums it up. You know, the GRC care more about the people who disappeared than the people who never left. So she's looking out for those people that didn't leave and now are being kind of like thrown off to the side with minimal resources and are kind of dying off of like
Mm.
tuberculosis, all these things because they're just that they're left with no resources and their homes are basically were taken
Gotcha.
away,
Okay,
you
that
know.
that 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 makes that
Does that make
clears it
sense?
up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I feel like I could have just said that sentence and it would have been
Yeah,
so much
no
easier. I'm
worries.
sorry.
Kind of fast forwarding because I'm just kind of looking at the time here. We're going to Baltimore, okay? And Baltimore, as we mentioned before, this is where we meet the quote unquote second super soldier, Isaiah, the first black super soldier,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows of Bucky. He's fought Bucky, but he's not happy in seeing Bucky right now. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
after their interaction, Sam is kind of just like, I don't want to say disgusted, but he's confused as to why the government would hide America's first black super soldier, because this super soldier came after Steve was in the ice. So why not highlight the quote unquote next Captain America? And I understand, just because I hate to say it because I'm black, but at the same time, yeah, why not highlight it? And instead of being praised, like Steve Rogers, he mentions that he was put away in jail for 30 years, so
For 30 years.
that
Yeah.
is where this series it touched for me the whole racial aspect of the US, how they would do something for somebody with blonde hair and blue eyes, and then do the same thing or give the same serum to a black guy, and then the black guy pretty much gets shitted on, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. And it's not something that isn't present in our history, right? Like it's very historical for, people of color who have served for a country to not be properly acknowledged, and even more so, like even further wronged afterwards, and that's what, what's his name? Isaiah is kind of
Mm-hmm.
representing, right? I think and I think I'll dive into something and we get into episode 3, but he was then even further experimented on. Like
Mm-hmm.
he served for his country, he's risked his life doing it. He's not immortal. Like he is risking his life. Yes, he's enhanced. He took on this, like the Winter Soldier, which is huge. Like you see everyone's reaction when he goes into like the club in episode 3. Like that's big, like he ripped off his arm, like he served, and then afterwards they were like, we're gonna just experiment. They would have
Right.
never done that to Steve,
Mm-hmm.
ever. But it shows the it shows like how differently they're
Yeah.
treated, so.
And
Mhm.
say after that they're outside of Isaiah's house, and cops pull up, and they kind of do the cop thing, which I hate that it's a thing, and it's like it's like a staple in our history that no matter what, we are going to be mistreated, and they're going to they looked at Sam as like, all right, who are you? Right,
The
where it's
instigator,
like,
yeah.
hold on, sir, talking to Bucky's like, has this man done anything? I was like, come on, y'all, like, first off, look at him, and one of them is like, oh right, he's an Avenger, and it should it
And only then do they
right,
change their
right,
tone, yeah.
so this episode is where I made a note to say, if anything, it touched a little bit more on the issues of race, not only in say the past of like say 50s or 60s, but even in today, you know. So whoever decided to write this, I appreciate.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a well depicted scene because like they're bickering. They're both bickering. It's not Sam attacking Bucky. Like they're both kind of going
Mm-hmm.
at it at what Bucky just showed Sam, right? And when they come in, they automatically like assume that Sam is like the instigator to this, that he's the threat. And when Sam's raising his voice, the police respond very differently. They're like, they see him as a very clear
Mm-hmm.
threat and problem when he's just raising his voice. You know what I mean? It's perceived very differently than Bucky. And I do love how Bucky, when like he asks, I think he asked him like, oh, like, is this man bothering? He's like, no, he's not bothering me. Like, do you know who he is? Like, like he kind of defends him. And I like that he did that. Like, kind of like, I like that scene overall. And I think I didn't expect the series to touch so much on this topic, and I'm happy that it did because it's very much real in the world, you
Yeah.
know?
I uh I want to kind of just fast forward just to a point that you just saying that just now. It reminded me of like if Bucky's over here saying, "Do you know who he is?" and then like say the cop recognizes like, "Oh shit, that's an Avenger," and then kind of fast forward to episode 3, John Walker's like, "Do you know who I am?" and then the person just like, "I don't care."
Oh,
No, I don't
yes.
care.
Yes. Oh my God. I love
Right.
that. And just because we mentioned it right now, I know we're kind of skipping forward. We're still finishing up episode 2, but that scene, I think, makes us dislike him so much because he's not coming from a place of humbleness. Like, I'm taking this role. I understand, like, maybe I wasn't really worthy of it, but I want to be. Like, he's like almost entitled to
Yeah.
it, like, and he really shows it in that
Mm-hmm.
scene. No, that I didn't even notice that. That was
Yeah.
good. That was good.
Okay. Oh yeah. Boom. I got you. High five.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
I believe,
Um,
say before this episode ends, the Flag Smashers. I made a note to say that this is the first time we hear of the Power Broker. They mentioned the Power Broker and their dealings with them in the Super Soldier Serum, and now Flag Smashers aside, Bucky has a plan. Oh, no. Before we even get to the plan, we have to talk
Therapy.
about the therapy because, yes, Bucky does get arrested in New York and not New York, Baltimore. And then we go to the police station, enter the therapist, and the therapy session begins.
This scene, I mean, it starts off with like the typical Bucky Sam banter. I love how like the therapist is like, y'all got to get close, look into each other's eyes. And then she's like, are you guys doing a staring
Mm-hmm.
contest? Like, and then she's like, knock that out.
Right.
This is serious. But then it really does, like, she gets something out of Bucky, like you see his frustrations. I think she asks him like, why are you so bothered by Sam, and
Mm-hmm.
at first it's still playful, like, I just need him to stop talking, like I need him to talk less. But then we really have a breakthrough, like he's like, why did you give up the shield? But not just that, we realize why that's so important to him. He's like, if Cap was wrong about you,
Use.
then it means he
Mm-hmm.
was wrong about me.
Mm-hmm.
Cap was really the person to was trying to convince Bucky to realize, like, the things you did were not you and you are worth
Right.
saving.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am risking everything, right? In Civil War, he's like, why are you doing this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he's just like you're worth it. And if he was wrong about Sam, he's like, automatically that means like that wasn't real. You know what I mean? So you see that seems so good. And as soon as I saw this, I think it's actually going to be episode 4 where we start off the episode with this huge heart to heart where I think Buggy's in Wakanda.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's episode 4 we get into that. But man, like, Sebastian Stan did such an amazing job in the series. So good in his acting.
Well, with like say Sam's response, like he said that he thought he was doing the right thing, no matter what him or Steve Rogers thought. Like Sam believes he wasn't in the wrong in giving the shield. Like he was more so. It wasn't like a power play. It wasn't on some like he just did it just to do it. He thought he was doing what he was right. And if we were to kind of compare that to Captain America, Steve Rogers, that is, that is technically what Steve Rogers is all about, doing what's right. So whether he notices it or not, this is something that they kind of share, you know? So I get Bucky's frustration, but I do understand that, say he Sam believes that there is technically only one Captain America and nobody can replace Steve. And he didn't want to replace Steve just because Steve is Steve and there's no need to. You know, he just wanted to be Falcon and that's what he thought was right, you know. Um, but in this session, you can see Bucky's hurt and Sam, I actually kind of didn't. It was like though it was comical, but like in the second watching of this episode, I kind of didn't like how Sam ended it. Like he was just like, "Let's squash it today, and then after this, it's over." And thanks, Doc. You know, it was like super sarcastic. There was nothing really healing between the two. You know, it was just more so. Let me
You
just
know,
get this shit out the way.
I really do agree with that, and more so because like I'm very much on that side of like I'm so defensive of Bucky because he's been such a abused like individual in the MCU and he has such a dark history. And he allowed himself to be vulnerable, you know what I mean? And Sam didn't do that in the same way, and instead it was just like, we're gonna get this through and then I'm never gonna talk to you again, you know what I mean? So I think I agree, but I think from like a different angle and perspective. But no, I hear what you're saying. But I do love how he does. I think it's funny how he finishes like, "Thanks for making it
Right.
weird, Doc," and then they just like head out.
Right. So now from there, that's when we get the plan. If we're going to find a super soldier, we have to find somebody who has the most knowledge on the super soldier serum, which is Zemo. And
And
oh,
they don't get to Zemo because necessarily the super soldier serum, but Hydra,
right,
right? They're
right.
like Hydra's most likely behind this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think in the conversation with Isaiah, he mentions that after the failed super soldiers, the five, like the ones referring to, I'm sorry, I'm mixing that up with something in episode
Mm-hmm.
3. Anywho, but he mentions
Mm-hmm.
Hydra, and that's how they're like, okay, if we're gonna figure this out for the super soldier serum, we're gonna speak to the man who knows more about Hydra's secrets than anybody, and then we land at
Yeah.
Zemo. Yeah,
Okay. So are we at episode 3?
we're at episode 3.
Perfect.
Yes.
I gotta. Oh, episode 3. It starts with this commercial from the Global Repatriation Council. And I was like, this sounds kind of cheesy already. but
Trash.
this is where, like, say, after this commercial, I don't know if it was immediately after, but this is where enter John Walker coming out of a van, and you see that him and his partner are working with like GRC soldiers or whatnot. So this is where I got the idea that John Walker was employed by the GRC.
Something that maybe I'm wrong. I didn't catch like they had like it was explicitly like put that it's like their GRC soldiers that are next to like
Mm.
John, and okay, then you know what? I'm gonna take that back. You're probably right. Yes, and they're in Germany.
Right.
They're in Germany, and this is where we get that scene we kind of talked
Mm-hmm.
about already, where he confronts like the civilians who housed the flag
Right.
smashers, and we get that very kind of entitlement feel. This is where whatever sympathy and understanding we kind of had for him in episode 2 is quickly like being dismantled, like because he expects people to give him the same respect that Steve earned,
Right.
with all his
Mm-hmm.
years, So we see that, and Lamar, we start to see how Lamar is the person to ground John in his frustration, because we're definitely see him start to shift into that where he's feeling the weight of the shield, because Lamar is like, something like, you need to kind of understand why people are supporting this, like she's giving resources to these people who have been displaced, are in these camps, like there's a loyalty there. They're not going to tell you anything, we have to try to find a different way to get this information.
So with that being said, yes, he doesn't have the respect as Captain America, but it's not like they put an average Joe Blow into this these shoes. You know, I feel like of the work he's done in the military, yes, it does deserve some type of respect, but now that I'm talking it out, it's more so those were more so covert, and nobody knows of John Walker, the individual. You know, let's
Yeah.
say if there's a quote unquote, like say the story of SEAL Team 6, we don't know exactly who those people are, but we know that there are teams out there that take care of missions. Now, enter John Walker. He's just like, do you know who I am? If I were the other person, would like, I wouldn't have like said I don't give a shit. I would just like, no, I don't actually. I don't know who
Hmm.
you are. Yeah, you just became Captain America, but I know Steve Rogers from what I read on the internet, from going to the Steve Rogers Museum. I know everything about Steve Rogers and everything that he's done for this country. You, I don't know. Who are you,
Hmm.
fam? Why are you in my place of
And
business?
absolutely. And, it's, I think the biggest thing that distinguishes Steve and John is, like Steve wasn't a great Captain America and great subject to take the serum because he was a good soldier. It was because he was a good man,
Mm-hmm.
like, period. Because, going back to Captain America, the first Avenger, I think I forget if he was like the sergeant, something like, or he wants this other guy to take the serum. He's a perfect soldier, he takes orders, all of that. But the serum not only enhances,
Mm-hmm.
someone's abilities and strength, it enhances the good,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it's like the doc who says it, like, good becomes great, bad becomes
Mm-hmm.
worse. And that's why Steve was hands down the best pick
Mm-hmm.
because he was a good man, And not to say that John's not a good man, he just has flaws that Steve didn't present, and we see those flaws occur even before, I know we're jumping ahead, before he takes the serum. And, once that happens, it just enhances it so much more,
But with the whole good being great, bad becoming worse, this is where like as I'm rewatching this, I feel like Carly is on the side of good. Yes, she has her mission to help the people that were displaced, but if I were to make a good or bad super soldier category, I would technically put Carly under the good even though her cause is different from Steve Rogers, if that makes sense.
Oh,
I wouldn't make
absolutely.
her
Yeah.
or her team on this side of bad, because we've seen bad. Like I've already put not only John Walker, I put the Green Goblin there, I've put the Abomination there. There are certain characteristics that we've seen throughout the MCU to where there is a bad category of super soldiers in as far as personality goes. But as far as the Flag Smashers now, I would put them on the side of good, even though their mission is something that's against what the world wants, if that makes sense.
The GRC
Right.
specifically. And I don't just, yeah, absolutely. And that's the complexity, I think, about this villain, because she's technically the villain of the film,
Right.
right? Or this
It's a film. It's
season. Like, sure, basically,
right.
basically. But she's, she has intentions to help these people. They call her like a Robin Hood. Like, she's helping these people that the GRC aren't really acknowledging,
Mm-hmm.
and they're dying, right? In this particular episode, we do see though how that serum obviously is enhancing the good, but it's also enhancing the bad. Like this, I think we're jumping kind of ahead in the episode, but in episode 3, we see them go to like the GRC supply
Mm-hmm.
center, and everyone's on board with the mission to steal these supplies and give them to the displaced people, the
Mm-hmm.
refugees. But then she, in like as an individual, makes the decision to blow up the entire facility that still had people in
Right.
them. And you can tell from the person that was in the car, like the van with her, like that was like, this was not the plan. Like, we're not supposed to kill people. But she's, being enhanced by the serum in a way that's kind of, she's becoming extreme, where she's not seeing the line anymore, and that's, something that we're going to see kind of happen to John as well. Like, he's attempting to do good, but the pressure of the shield, the addition to the serum that comes down the road, just steers them way off the track.
Yeah. So say here in episode 3, this is where we get our first instance of Madripoor. And I remember you telling me way back when the significance of Madripoor. Can you kind of get into that real quick?
So, and something we got to revisit before we get even deeper is the breakout scene. But to your question about Madripoor, so Madripoor is being set up essentially to be, it's kind of like in my head what Nowhere is in Guardians of the
Mm-hmm.
Galaxy, where it's just like crime everywhere. It's, people just kind of living in, what's the word, like they use a specific phrase for that. I wish I wrote it down. I was like, I don't need to write it down, I'll remember. But it's
I remember they said
like
something like, say this is
lawlessness,
like, yeah,
lawlessness.
like not the high Madripoor, but the low Madripoor or something like that. I don't know. There's it's like
Yeah, no,
divided.
but it's the key word is like lawlessness too, right? There's no like, you know police like kind of enforcing like rules or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. They're all just kind of like mixed. Like there's a lot of, the king of Madripoor is the power broker. And correct me if I'm wrong, and obviously we'll find out as we keep watching the series, but I feel like it was confirmed at the end of the series that the power broker is Sharon Carter. Wasn't that like explicitly shown? Am I
No,
wrong
like
here?
say here, and this is why I said what I said earlier. Yes, the show kind of ended with us believing her to be the power broker, but now thinking about it, because they're in Madripoor and enter Sharon Carter, of course. But like, say while they're there, she's talking about uh he this, he that, and I feel like there were other references from the person that they ended up meeting with saying the power broker this, he that. So I feel like if anything, the power broker is male, and the way that the season ended, it was like on some, she was like, now I have unlimited resources of the government, and I believe if anything, she was talking to the power broker, if that makes sense.
Okay, okay. See, I was left with the impression that she was the power broker, and I get the whole like usage of the pronouns, but I mean, it seemed the way I had received it was that she obviously doesn't want everyone to know that she was the power
Correct.
broker,
Right.
so
I got
everyone
you.
assumes the people in power are
Mm-hmm.
men, so easily to use the word pronoun he to kind of steer it off
Right.
track, right? But obviously, as we rewatch all of this, I will solidify my placement in this. But that makes sense because if it was left with just us assuming she was, but then I do remember her taking that phone call and like saying she has all these resources, it would make sense for her to be speaking to like say the power
Mm-hmm.
broker or to one of your theories that you mentioned back in Shang-Chi, who knows if it's like the sister she's confirming with, and now they got this huge empire,
Right.
you
Right.
know? Yeah, so I guess we'll conclude with that assumption once we kind of get towards the end of this
That would be
season.
wild if Shang-Chi's
Um,
sister became or was like the quote
the
unquote power broker, because we don't know where timeline wise Shang-Chi lands in comparison to,
It's around the same
but
time.
we do
Yeah.
know that if anything, Shang-Chi's sister took over the dad's empire, and with that, she has enough money to be any type of power broker. So who knows?
Who knows? Or Sharon is the power broker, and now she's aligned with the person who took the place of the Mandarin. Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? I guess we'll find out in due time. But the scene that we kind of skipped over that I want to get back to is in Berlin, Germany, right when we first see Zemo in this episode, and I do love so much the way they played this out. Where Bucky is like in a hypothetical of like, what
Mm-hmm.
if, and what if this happened, and like the perfect storm where it's like someone could easily slip through the chaos, and then he's like, why are you talking so casually, like I don't like the way you're talking right now, that's not normal for
Yeah.
you. And then enter their
Right.
Zemo. I love that. That was so well, I think that was just so well like directed. That was super good. And before even that, the exchange that Zemo and Bucky kind of have together is pretty interesting to kind of look at, because the first thing that he says is like those words that would initially trigger
Mm-hmm.
the Winter
Mm-hmm.
Soldier, and he obviously knows like he no longer is under that influence because he kind of says it, but he's like, I just wanted to see what the new you how you the new you responded to the old world words. And so that was very
Yeah.
loaded of a scene,
Yeah.
so
Okay. Say with Zemo, because he is fully aware. Like and Zemo obviously is a smart guy. He's putting things together, and they are there because of his knowledge of Hydra and the Super Soldier Serum. So um, I feel like if anything, this was the only play that they could have played. Like no matter what, Zemo I feel like should have been in the conversation when it comes down to the Super Soldier. Even if it's not breaking him out, it could have just been a conversation on what he knows about Hydra, and then they go to figure out what the connections are between Hydra then and the people of today.
Yeah, and it's looking back to that scene, like he knows that they're desperate, which is why he had like kind of the pull for them to, well, for Bucky to make the decision to break him out. But I think Bucky came in knowing he was gonna break Zemo out because as they're having their conversation, he's like, "What are you
Mm-hmm.
reading?" And then Zemo picks up on that. He opens what I think was like the key or the way to get out of the
Mm-hmm.
cell, and then that's how like everything plays out. So I think if anything, he knew just like that Zemo wasn't gonna give up the cards without any like type of compromise. But it makes so much sense why Zemo got in the picture,
Mm-hmm.
right? If Hydra's their key to figuring out how the super soldier serum really got like is being distributed right
Mm-hmm.
now, he would be the man to pull. So from there, that's where they go into Madripoor. We kind of already broke that down a little bit. um let's see, I think I had some notes on there really quickly. Oh, Hightown, that's what
Yeah,
you were kind
that's
of
what I was
talking
trying to
about. So
figure out. Yeah, yeah.
Hightown, yeah. And leading into Sharon Carter, we have a lot of little nudges, even from episode, I think it was episode 2, where Bucky's in the plane with Sam. Like, we should just steal the shield, Sam. We should just take the shield. And he's like, do you remember the last time that we stole the
Right.
shield? Sharon Carter became an enemy of the state, and then we were on the run for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had like kind of nudges, and then here they're like, oh, we have no friends in Hightown.
Inner
And
Sharon.
turns out they
Yeah.
did. Yes, their little
Mm-hmm.
guardian, right? So I did like the way that it was tiptoed because us watching, we're just obviously like theorizing the entire
Right.
time. So we kind of suspected her making an entry sometime soon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And definitely, like, say, because I kind of want to breeze by their meeting. Their meeting didn't go well and it ended with somebody dying, and then that ended up putting a bounty on their head. But then we kind of fast forward to them hanging out with Sharon Carter, and then from there we get the actually no, it was before we even go to Sharon's place. I just like the line of just like her connection with all three of them is like, hey, I did this for you so you can help him, just so he doesn't do this to him,
Oh yeah,
like I don't
and
know.
now we're
Right,
here.
that line in itself, I don't know why I enjoyed it, because that's what we got in Civil War.
She basically summarized the events of Civil War, at least her involvement in it,
Right.
right? And it's also funny because it's like, obviously we knew that Sharon stole the shield and the suit, Falcon's suit for
Mm-hmm.
them, right? She's the one who assisted. But at least I didn't put the two and two together to recognize that she also became an enemy of the state, right? We really didn't get that addressed up until now. And she's been living in that for
Yeah.
years, right? Not just, post Civil War,
The
through
blip.
the events of the
Mm-hmm.
blip, the five
Mm-hmm.
years. And so she's been having to, like she said, hustle. And she's like, if I'm going to hustle, I'm going to hustle like all the way, And so she has like this really nice house,
Mm-hmm.
like apartment or whatever. She deals in real art, and that's kind of how she makes her money in Madripoor. And there's this line that I thought was so funny from Bucky. He was like, "She's kind of awful now because she's kind of like rough around the edges at this point. She's kind of had to be, right? She's lived, like 5+
Mm-hmm.
years having to survive in Madripoor, which is not like, at least in the MCU, like a good place."
Well, who knows? Like, say initially we get to know her as Steve Rogers' neighbor, right?
Yeah.
And then we see her as a quote unquote love interest. And fast forward, we don't know if she knows that Steve went back to be with her Aunt Peggy, you know, but who knows? If she does know, she could be a little salty on top of being an enemy of the state, and she doesn't want anything to do with anything Avenger related.
Well, clearly Cap didn't go back for her. You know, like he went back for everyone at the what is it called? The prison that they were at. Do you remember it off the top of your head? I want to say, my head wants to say the yacht, and I know it's not
Oh,
the
the
yacht.
raft.
It's the raft.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Yeah, the raft. You know, he went for everybody at the raft, but like kind of left Sharon behind. So I would be salty even if I didn't know that information if I was Sharon, but she probably doesn't know because in episode one we have Taurus who's like asking Sam like, "Hey, what happened to Cap? You know, there's a rumor that he's on a mission in the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Is Cap in the moon?" And so I'm assuming she doesn't. I wonder if that's something that's gonna be like brought to her in season two because I feel like it would you know maybe like we leave her at the end of the season feeling like she might not be on the side of good, but she's
Right.
most likely like playing something in the
Mm-hmm.
middle. But that might push her all the way to like being a full-on villain, so I'd like to see if she finds out that information, how she feels about
Yeah.
it.
This whole series, just in general, I know we're kind of getting a little off, but like, say this right now in terms of where we are in the MCU, it's like we don't know for sure if she's the power broker, but we know that this series is more so about power. And there's so far two things, which I would say having to deal with the power of street level events, which I mentioned to you before, which is this and Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi's sister specifically, you know. So they're somewhat in the vicinity of each other, Madripoor and wherever that castle was in Shang-Chi. But like, say if it comes down to surface level events, we know that if anything, Sharon Carter is in the position of power of. We don't know if she's completely bad. We don't know the intentions of the power broker, but if anything, she is one of the higher ups that could, if anything, who knows, be related to Val, could be related to
Possibly.
uh, any other higher ups. Because now, being that she's kind of quote unquote being pardoned, and I know I'm already going to the end of the series, but like has the power of the U.S. government behind her, she is top level, no matter what, you know. So, um,
Yeah, like in the underground, she has power, and that's been established. Whether she is the power broker or just something, like of right hand man or close to
yeah.
that. But now she also has power on like the superficial end, where she is able to walk the streets of the United States and not get arrested. Like she's kind of reinstated. She was so it's she has a lot kind of loaded if she does steer into the full side of
Mm-hmm.
bad, and that's I kind of a storyline I want to see. Like I kind of do want to see her go all the way.
Well, that is going to be a topic for another show because at the end of the day,
Okay.
I would love to expand on that, but we're we're pushing on time
We
here.
still
Yeah, we
got a
still
lot,
got
yeah.
episode 3 here. So, say
um,
with episode 3, we get to see the Zemo dance that everybody enjoyed on the internet,
Lord.
and from there, that's where we learn of the scientist and his location. So they find out who is manufacturing the super soldier serum, and pretty much locate him to be in a storage container.
Yes. And just a little breakdown on Dr. Wilfred Nagel, because I definitely did a little deep dive on
Mm-hmm.
him. So in the comics, he's actually the guy that's hired after Dr. Abraham Erskine, after he dies, to create the super soldier serum that, birthed Steve Rogers, Captain America. So his code name is Joseph Reinstein, which can easily be confused by like the original maker of the super soldier serum because it's very similar. But he works with the U.S. Army trying to recreate it, and he recruits 300 African American soldiers as test
Mm-hmm.
subjects to, try and recreate the serum. Only one actually survived, and that's Isaiah
Mm-hmm.
Bradley.
Bradley, I would say.
Bradley.
Yeah.
Bradley. Yeah. Isaiah Bradley, like the one we're introduced
Mm-hmm.
to. So he's the only survivor, and then he takes on the mantle of Captain America. So it's funny, it's cool to see how it's established in the comics and how it's being connected here in this adaptation. So I wanted to make sure to kind of bring that up because I think it adds to just the topic that we were discussing. There's a lot of real life themes, events that are being incorporated in here. Like it's not, outside of our history for there to be like experiments
Right.
done on like the African American community, knowingly or not. And so it's something adding to that topic that we kind of already
Yeah,
discussed.
and you can see it in Sam's face as soon as that the doctor mentioned that they had the sample of a test subject. They already knew that they were talking about Isaiah, you know? And if we didn't have that introduction in episode 2, then there would have been confusion, you know? So, with that being
Mm-hmm.
said, this almost kind of ties up the the idea of the U.S. government being involved, you know, because the scientist did say initially he worked for the CIA before he was blipped to develop the super soldier serum with Isaiah's blood or whatnot. But then
Mm-hmm.
fast forward 5 years, it was more so the power broker that pretty much financed him to continue. So I would say with him kind of going through this story, this is almost, it leads me to believe that the broker in itself is American. I feel like the broker, it has to be somebody that either worked for the U.S. government or is currently working for the U.S. government. Hence why I'm saying, if anything, is a possibility that Ross could be the power broker, because we still have yet to see uh, Thunderbolt Ross as the Red Hulk, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
his story, no matter what, we already know that he's dying of cancer. They established that in Black Widow. So he is, I'm gonna say, desperate to find something. And even though the story of Black Widow was before Blip, before Infinity War, we know that being that since Black Widow 5 years have passed, it's possible that he knew of this scientist and decided to go off grid and hire this scientist to uh, recreate the serum, to finish the serum. And if anything, now they established here in episode 3 that the Flag Smashers, they've taken all the serum, and now that this scientist is destroyed, the Power Broker is willing to work with the Flag Smashers to get the serum, you know? So I know it's all kind of tangled up, but who knows? He, now that this scientist is out of here, that he's gone, the Thunderbolt Ross, I would say, is now looking for a substitute that eventually turns him into the Red Hulk.
Right. And I could definitely buy into that, especially with the fact that it's not plain and clear that Sharon is the power broker, right? So we have, like, it's still open to who could it be, right? And I feel like he has the motivation to do all of those things, right? Because we know that he's dying,
Right.
right? And just to kind of go back on like the history of just like, that whole project for this doctor to create the super soldier serum. Like initially he was hired by Hydra, right, after the 5 failed
Mm-hmm.
attempts, which is what he quotes, referring to the super soldiers or like the winter soldiers that we see in Civil War. And then after the dismantling, or basically just the fall of Hydra itself, that's where he was then recruited by the CIA to continue that using Isaiah's blood blip, and then from there the power broker then funds it. So it would make sense for it to be not just an American, but someone who was aware of this project, right? So then, um, who would be aware of it and then have the incentive to privately fund it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So that makes a lot of sense. So I could follow that thread for sure. Like I still kind of wanted to be Sharon, but I could see Ross fitting that
Yeah.
role.
That I feel like from there we get to see Sharon Carter be a badass agent and take out some folks in this place with all these storage containers. Um, but from there, I think the episode the episode doesn't end there. Where does the episode go from there?
So after this scene, right, like they fight off the bounty
Mm-hmm.
hunters, they're able to escape. First of all, I just want to comment on that scene with Sharon. That is such a badass
Mm-hmm.
scene. Like when she has her hood like down and she's just like taking out all these bounty hunters by herself, for a moment before everyone else kind of comes out. That was juicy. That was so good. So we get this scene with the GRC supply center, which we already kind of talked about, where
Mm-hmm.
Carly really starts to show the negative effects of the super soldier serum and having her steer into more extreme territory,
Mm-hmm.
right? From there, we have John and Lamar at the prison, and they basically assume correctly that
Bucky broke him out.
Bucky broke out
Mm-hmm.
Zemo. Yeah, exactly. And so from here, we do know that. Oh, we finish off with Bucky taking a walk to meet up with one of the Dora Milaje members. I don't know how it's pronounced because I don't think they say it just yet in the series, but it's spelled Ayo, Ayo,
I would
Io.
say Io.
That
Mm-hmm.
person. We'll go with that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go with that. So he follows the Kimoyo beads and leads them to there, and they say it seems ends with "We're here for Zemo," and then
Yep. And I think with that, this just seeing those beads just in general, you know how I love connections and all that. So them putting that in there, I was like, all right, Wakanda's here. I know it. I know those beads anywhere. you know. So yeah, I'm
oh
glad that
yeah.
we get to see that, and then we see more of the Wakandans going forward. But we are going to chat about that at a later date.
Next time.
Yeah.
And something before we just wrap it up, last thing is like they did kind of hint at the Dora Milaje becoming a part of the story because before Bucky breaks him out, or as Bucky's explaining to Sam his little hypothetical that's actually
Mm-hmm.
happening in real time, he's like, "How do you feel like that? How do you feel the Wakandans are going to feel about Zemo roaming free?" And so it kind of like sets the stage for us to see them,
Yeah.
at the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty cool. We're definitely going to see. I think it's episode 4 where we get this really cool fight scene that I'm really excited to talk
Yeah.
about.
Not
It's
yet.
actually
Let's not get into it.
pretty
Yeah.
dope.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
excited. We'll get there next
Yep.
week,
Yep.
guys.
So say right now, because I know we had a whole other topic to get into, but right now we're almost approaching an hour 50. How are you doing on time?
Dude, I'm
Great.
good. This is the WandaVision.
Awesome. Okay.
Got
She wants to make time for Wanda, and we are going to make time for
always.
Wanda. So let me switch up the screen here real quick. All right. So WandaVision, right? The reason why, say we've already recapped that whole season, and so far that was the longest episode we've had today. But today I feel like it's gonna top that. The reason why we're kind of bringing Wanda and Vision, because it's not necessarily WandaVision we're talking about, but we're more so gonna get into the future of Vision. We already have an idea of where Wanda is. She's about to be in the multiverse of madness, and we kind of know that that's kind of where she's leading down. But as far as Vision is concerned, I was watching another stream the other day. I mentioned it on Instagram. The MCU crew. I'm about to pull up that clip in a second, but they brought up some interesting topics uh, that I wanted to kind of bring to you all's attention. And Grace, I'm gonna play it right now. I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to hear it. I'll let you know when it's over. But yeah, let's just give it a listen, and
Let's
we're
do
gonna
it.
chat about it. All right.
Because it's a very cyberpunk one where it's like if I discovered buried or embedded memories of a previous life or of a life I've had that is the real life, and everything I'm currently experiencing is just fake or it's a simulation. Which one would I be more attached to? I don't know. Like, I guess in my head, from a narrative and storytelling point of view, I'm just wondering, like, if this frees him up to, like, go and
He
do, because
loves
like
her.
that comic is very popular. Like the Vision standalone comic it actually is in history as being the first comic book that was part of college curriculum. Like, so it's not only like beloved by like critics and comic lovers, like it's just one of the most popular comics of all time. And he in that comic, he's not with Wanda. And my thought is like this frees them up to do that story if they want to. This frees them up to like have Kid Vision and to have like all these other characters and have all this stuff without him being attached to Wanda. Because Vision, as we know in the MCU, is like kind of attached to Wanda. Like you can't really do a lot of interesting things with the story because that old ball and chain is there. But if they kind of have this different version of like this like new Vision that's like, yes, I have knowledge of Wanda, but that's not this version of me, then that frees him up to like be his own character.
All right. So I've already kind of said my thoughts on Instagram because what she mentioned was more so in reference to this white vision, right? And this white vision we know to be initially a part of Sword, like Sword, uh, broke him down and rebuilt him and basically gave him a new quote unquote CPU in place of the Mind Stone. Now, I my logic behind it was being that this quote unquote virtual vision kind of unlocked the memories of the actual Vision's past. I believe that with these memories now quote unquote installed, this is almost like a reboot to where this Vision should be the same Vision that we knew to the end of Infinity War. But he flew off, and I was kind of confused by this because, if anything, if he had all these quote unquote memories reinstalled, I would think that he'd be on the side of good and fight alongside the whole WandaVision family against Agatha Harkness. But I want to get a feel for what Grace has to say because I sent her the whole clip. Kind of tell us how you feel on what the streamer said.
Well, before I kind of dive into my perspective of it, I feel like I want to give a little bit of a reference to the specific comic that she's referring to, which is The Vision. It ran from 2015 to 2016, I believe, and it's a 12 issue series. It is just as amazing as she's explaining it to be. Um, like I've mentioned, I'm super invested in Wanda and Vision, their storylines together, and it's really good. So essentially, this storyline references the events of the White Vision, the comics, which kind of play out similarly to how we see it in WandaVision, in that it's a sector of the government that dismantles the Vision, and when he's put back together, he's the White Vision. He's missing the piece of him that makes him much more than just an android, but very much human,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in the show, the piece that's missing is the memories, right? That's like the huge part. Um, and so in the Vision comic book series, it's essentially post those events. Vision has regained the piece of him that disconnected him from the world, right? He's essentially returned in full form and loves Wanda like wholeheartedly. But at this point, Wanda has moved on. Like she's had to mourn the husband that she basically lost, right? And she moves on with this character named Wonder Man. And Wonder Man is the hero whose brainwaves were used to create the Vision. So it makes a lot of sense why she kind of connected with him after his essential like passing, right? Like for him, for her, he's basically like gone, dead, you know? And once the vision comes back, it's kind of like too late, you know? But Wanda obviously still cares for Vision and wants him to have, you know, kind of like what she has, like the love that she found in Wonder Man. And she says something, and I sent this comic to you,
Yeah,
but she says to
I have it up on the
Vision,
screen.
she says to Vision, you know, like, I think Wonder Man and I work because he's like you, but he's not you. So she gives him this like chip that has her brain waves. And she's like, and I hope that this will allow you to find someone who's like me, but not me, you know? And so he does that, but unfortunately it's like it's just not her. Like there's this there's scene that I kind of clipped together two different pages of my favorite issue of the series, which is issue number 7. I also sent the cover of it. So in the cover you see Vision surrounded by like multiple Wandas, which is meant to just represent like his longing for her. And the start of this 7th issue is like this conversation that that Wanda and Vision are having in bed. They share this joke, like they're laughing, they just are so in love with each other. And this issue ends with him having a very similar moment with his android wife, who has Wanda's brainwaves, but they're sharing that same joke, and it's so evidently not shared in the same way. Like when you see those two scenes back to back, or those two panels, like that scene with him and his android wife are so cold, you know, in comparison. And it's heartbreaking. It's a really good series. I highly recommend it. Their story is very much like star-crossed lovers. You know, we want them so much to just have that love and not be disturbed, but unfortunately the MCU loves drama, so this is what we get. With that being established, you know, referring to just the piece of like, is the white vision that we have Vision? Like, I would assume so, right? He regains the piece of him that was missing, that made him this robot android, right? And if that's what we're falling to, which is that, yes, this is now Vision in his full form, why didn't he go to Wanda? Like, I suspected him to go to Wanda in her most vulnerable time, right? She just lost her children. She just lost, like, you know, the embodiment of her love for Vision. Like, it would have made sense for him to go and comfort her, but he didn't. And we don't really know why at this point. So I would definitely agree. Like the white vision that we see at the end of WandaVision, like I would see as Vision like fully returned. So we still have a lot to see in terms of like why was that the choice that he made, and what is he doing? And I think with what she was talking about, with like, you know, seeing something similar to this series being played out, I hope it is something we see, because it's a really amazing comic and I would like to see how they adapt it. But I mean, what would be the catalyst to that? Like for him to have his own like android family, right? Because if he wanted family, wouldn't he just reconnect with Wanda,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's there's a lot to kind of break down there, and Wanda's like on her own journey, and and maybe you have the answer, but is she even aware that Vision has regained his memories, right? Because
I don't
when
think
she
so.
saw the White Vision last,
She was battling Agatha at the time while White
right?
Vision was with the other Vision. I call him Westview Vision, but like say, I would assume that she doesn't know that White Vision is back, or I wouldn't even say back, but has the memories of the actual Vision. Now where my confusion lies, just with this specific clip, right? Because the Vision that we know, minus the Westview Vision, minus the White Vision, we see the end of Vision story with Thanos, and regardless of what happened to him, this Vision is in love with Wanda, and he was willing to die to pretty much save the universe, because that's what he was
Mhm.
hoping for. He was hoping the destruction of the Mind Stone would have ended Thanos's I don't know how to say that grammatically, but with that, it would stop Thanos in completing his gauntlet, you know. So he's willing to die for that, and in doing so, he if he was going to die, he would have wanted Wanda to do that because that was the love of his life, you know. So
Mhm.
fast forward, him getting the memories back, the memories would have been back up into that point, you know.
Yeah.
So it would have made sense for him and for me that, oh, now that I have the memories of my love for Wanda and she's actually potentially in danger down the block in Westview, I would go save her, you know. But uh, this streamer, I totally forgot her name. Oh, it's called she's called that bronze girl. She is more familiar and versed with the comic, and I feel like if anything for me to better understand it would be to just read it, just because who knows if there's a way to where he can separate his past from his objectives of today, because we don't know what his objectives are, because
Hmm.
there could have been something installed from Sword to where he could separate himself from that, and that's what she said. He could possibly kind of just move on, but just initially from when watching and hearing it, I just couldn't understand how he could move on from the love of his life.
And he obviously did because he left, right? And so that's a very big question mark. And I mean, with the way the story is gonna, like, with what where we've seen Wanda, and just like the trailers of Multiverse of Madness, it doesn't really. She seems isolated. Like,
Right.
so I'm going to assume he never came back, and she still has no idea that he's out
Mm-hmm.
there. You know. So even if he comes back, like maybe he had to just do something to kind of create that self identity or whatever. Like if he came back, like Wanda's not a doting housewife who's just waiting for her man to return. She's got shit to do. You know what I mean? Like she's the Scarlet Witch. Like if Vision comes back and is like, I'm ready to love you. Like, who are you to abandon me for so long and then leave me at my most vulnerable point and now just think you can enter my world? You know? So I think we are going to see his story become independent of Wanda, and I'm excited to see, like, because I'm sure that we're going to see them interact again. Like
They
it would
have
it
to.
wouldn't really make sense for them not
Mm-hmm.
to. Yeah. And I'm curious to see where Wanda's like feelings are, because I don't think she's gonna have like positive feelings of seeing him back for the first time, like knowing that like you've been here, you remember me, and you chose to leave. You know, like we're in like so it's just interesting. But I do think we're gonna see his story become
Mm-hmm.
independent. Is it gonna follow the Vision, comic storylines? I'm wondering how it's gonna end up there, right? Because in the comics, like it's like he creates his android family after Wanda gives him like that like little chip that has her
Mm-hmm.
brainwaves. There I guess she could do that, but she kind of gets to that point because of Wonder Man, and there's no Wonder Man established in the
Right.
MCU. So we might see an adaptation of that, right? I mean, there's usually not like a page for page like adaptations, with the things we've seen. It's usually like a mesh of a lot of different things. So I'm excited to see what his storyline does continue into. He was definitely like a big thread that was just kind of left hanging in the wind, at the end of WandaVision. Like there was no resolution with that. So
Yo,
we'll see when he comes
I just
back.
want to
Yeah.
say a quick shout out to Two Live. What up? I see you in the chat. But just kind of you saying that right now, I'm kind of thinking about what if, like, hypothetically, right? He gets his memory back and he's just like, shit, I gotta make it back to Wakanda because Thanos is here. You know, like what if it was just like on some like he's brought back to that immediate point because he doesn't know exactly what's happened since then, since the blip, and he's just like, I gotta get back. I gotta fight Thanos. I don't know what to do, you know? So I'm just thinking, what if it was just like on some, he just needed, yeah, just
Confusion.
confusion and him flying back to a war that's already over.
That would be so funny. And then just to respond to that, like, I mean, he still has like the memories of, I think, being created as the White Vision. So if he was confused but has his memories again, wouldn't he just go to Wanda and be like, "Hey, this is the last thing I remember, but then now I remember having been created by like this government, and then you and I were fighting, but now I remember. Like, can you explain to me like the gaps?" You know what I mean? It's like, if that was the case, I feel like you should have still gone to Wanda to be like, "I'm confused.
Well, yeah, like
Can you
because
help
say
me
at
out?"
this point, let's say if we were to make that assumption, it's just like he's on some. I remember I died. I'm gonna assume the government put me back together, and the war is still going on. So I'm gonna just fly off to Wakanda. I'll be right back.
No questions. There's a war. You
Right,
know, like this,
right.
half of the universe is at stake.
Yep, yep.
Lord, even where is he now? This is like the dad who's like, "I'm gonna go get cigarettes," and then just never comes
Mm-hmm.
back. Like, that's what that sounds like,
Yep.
you know? It's, I don't, it's interesting, but we're definitely gonna see his story become independent. Like, whatever the case may be, is like, I don't think Wanda is gonna want to rekindle that, like, after having just been left behind. You know what I mean? It's just, that's kind of where I'm seeing
But
it.
see,
Um,
that's where I would say at the end of WandaVision and her hearing the voices of her children, those are the children of her and Vision. You know, it's not
mm,
like her and Wonder Man and her and some other guy. So why not? If anything, I get it. We can go a separate route, and Vision just can be his own thing. But she is going to try to find a way to get the quote unquote kids. Are they even metaphorical? They're imaginary, or I don't even know. Who knows if there's actually
they
real in another universe? But they belong to those two, so those kids are the really only connection between her and Vision that could very well bring them back. I wouldn't say not in the multiverse of madness, but this may be something post multiverse of madness.
like down the road. And I totally see that. I totally see that. But then I bring up again, it's like, Wanda's not someone who's just waiting for him to come back. Like, for her, like, we agreed, like, what she probably doesn't know of like the White Vision's
Mm-hmm.
existence. Or I mean, not that the White Vision has now regained the full memories of the Vision. So I just feel like if I was Wanda and Vision comes back, like, "Hey, I've remembered for a long time about you, but I just never came back, and I actually left you in your most vulnerable state." Like, I just don't think Wanda would be like super forgiving, or at least not right away. That's like a huge thing. That's
I
pretty
would
big, you
say,
know? Even kids wouldn't like, you know, bring that back in, you
but I would
know?
also say in this moment, this White Vision, he's vulnerable too, just because. Yes,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Initially, he has the mission of killing Wanda and this imaginary vision, but this Westview vision reasons with him to the point to where the logic makes sense of the Westview vision and not necessarily of Sword. You know, so he could be to the point to where he's questioning everything. Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, he
Yeah.
has the
And yeah.
memories, but it's just like, do I continue to pursue, or now I have these, because he still has the objectives. I'm sure of Sword installed into his mind. I'm gonna say they have some type of control over him. Well, not necessarily control, but they could bypass something and bring him back to Sword. Who knows? I don't know, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I would say right now, the way WandaVision is and how he flew off, I'll just say that he's broken and he doesn't really necessarily know how to put himself back together.
All that totally stands. And I see that 100%, and I don't disagree with it. And let's just even say that, Sword doesn't have a direct hold on him anymore. They still created an influence in him that wasn't present, in the quote unquote original Vision, right? Pre him being killed off by Thanos, right? So that stands for sure. And that's kind of like that, I think, draws very much on the point that Bronze was making, and that, it's now two consciousnesses is
Mm-hmm.
that are coming together. And then you have a choice, like, do I lead the life I had, or do I branch out and kind of find something new? Because you're totally right. Like, he is also in a vulnerable state and he made a choice to leave. That stands, and that was his choice. And like, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that Wanda, or that he should have the expectation that he can then hop back into Wanda's life. You know what I
Right.
mean? In that same
Yeah.
dynamic, you know? So what you're saying stands. I still think it doesn't justify if he wants to say return and then expect things to just be fine and Wanda accept him as if nothing
Right.
happened, you know, because that's a very big thing. So um it's a loaded thing. Like, where they left us with Vision, it like puts up so many questions. I do hope that Bronze is right and we see some adaptation of like the Vision, the comic series, just because that it's a really good one, and I'd like to kind of see how they mesh that into what we know here and how it adapts with the story we've known so
Yeah.
far, you know.
Um, I just have that cover up. So say with the Vision series, he has a whole, I guess, synthetic family here. Yes.
And everything goes to like shit. Like, there's like the mom just keeps murdering
Oh shit.
people. The dog, it's crazy. It is crazy. Like, I like the, like, I kind of like, my heart leans on like the romance part of it, but it's like the whole, that's why like issue number 7 is like my favorite one, because it really reflects back to the history of Wanda and Vision
Mm-hmm.
together. But it's just so sad because Vision is really trying to have, you know, what Wanda wanted to have in, you know, like the House of M storyline in WandaVision, the series, you know, like, just that I just want to be with the person I love, have a family. You know, that's kind of what everyone wants in life. Well, most, you know, not everyone chooses that route, but you know, when that's kind of like the idea,
Right.
right? So he's trying to have that. Like, Wanda in the series kind of has that. She found that with Wonder Man, and he's trying to find that for himself. But it's like his wife is, although she has the brainwaves of Wanda, is not Wanda, you know, and he keeps having to cover up for these deaths, and like eventually it's like obviously people notice people are
Right.
dead. One of the characters that gets killed is I'm trying to remember his name. He has like these little, he has a black suit. He's actually the brother of Wonder Man in the comics. I'm gonna post on my page. It's literally gonna come to me as soon as we're finishing up. But
Post it on the
he
comics cinematic universe page, please. Thanks.
I know. I'm sorry, guys. I gotta work on that. This isn't about me. This is about the show. I'll be sure to post it, guys. But he gets buried like in the front yard, and they're animatronic. Oh no, not yet. Like, the dog uncovers him and gets electrocuted and killed. And we've shared little
Right.
snippets of
Yeah, I
like him
remember
being
that.
turned into the animatronic
Mm-hmm.
dog, which are pretty gory. Yeah, the whole series is just insane. It's really good. I can't like stress that enough. I actually didn't know that it's part of college or university like curriculum. That's insane to me, but I'm not surprised. Definitely check it out, guys.
Yeah. And I think that's everything that I had. Did you have anything else on the topic at hand?
No, I think that was it. That was it. When you sent me the clip, because I think you just sent it to me like, "Hey, Grace, is this like a good clip to like just post? Like, is it, you know, conversation provoking or whatever?" And I'm like, I want to talk a lot about it now, so yes, like, it's probably a good clip. Post it, and we're talking about it on Friday too. So I'm happy we were able to bring it into the show, or the episode, I should
Yeah.
say.
And say when it comes down to like just clips like that, I don't mind doing more like that. So say if you all have any topics that you all want to kind of bring to light as far as what's going on in the MCU with certain characters, I'd be happy, and I'm sure Grace would be happy to just react and see where everything could go. Like, because honestly, after our WandaVision recap about a month or two ago, I was honestly kind of done thinking about Wanda and Vision pretty much until like Multiverse of Madness. But like, say if you all have anything that I feel like it's worth sharing and talking about, yeah, go ahead and hit us up in the DMs, and I would love to do more, I guess, quote unquote, reaction videos to that. So, yeah, hit us up. The Instagram is at the bottom, the Comic Cinematic Universe, and yeah, just hit us up and let us know of any other topics that you feel is pretty cool to chat about. And
Oh, yes,
yeah.
agreed. I didn't want to interrupt if you had more, and then I'm like, this pause is very long.
Right,
Like,
right. But yeah, I believe
um,
that is everything I got. So yeah, thanks.
thank you
That
guys.
bronze girl for that
This is
topic.
absolutely. I know it was a hot topic. I'm so happy that they brought it up because honestly, something I think we like very shortly mentioned in our recap because we were very ambitious with it, and we're like, we're gonna break down a whole
Right,
season in this
right.
one episode. But thank you guys for joining us as we broke down episodes 1 through 3 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Next week, we're gonna be finishing up the first season of the show, and yeah, please shoot out those topics if there's any questions that you guys have for us, and we'll be sure to bring them up in the show.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is episode 20, and right now holds the record. 2 hours 15 minutes. So
Yes.
we will catch you all next week. Grace, you have a great weekend, and likewise to everybody's viewing.
Have a good
All
one,
right,
guys.
see
See you
ya
guys next time.
later.